Okay, I'm gonna show you how to disassemble and reassemble an HK417 fusion engine conversion from Bingo Airsoftworks. So let's start by removing the upper receiver. Should come straight out. We'll set that aside. Okay, and then let's also remove the stock from the gun. Set that aside. And you can start by taking off the grip, and then we can take off the selector switch, and we have the screw on the back here that actually holds the engine in place as well. We'll take off the macro line connector and remove the motor plate. Okay, once the motor plate is taken out, there are two grip screws. We'll have to take these out inside here. Okay, and the grip should just lift right out. Alright, next we need to remove the selector switch. So that uses a 2.5 millimeter hex key. Now this selector switch actually has been upgraded because the screw had stripped out, so this is actually a 4 millimeter screw instead of a 3 millimeter screw that you'll find on standard ones, but it uses the same tool to remove it. You want to push down on the selector switch and loosen the screw, take that out, and then very carefully lift up the selector switch because there's a tiny ball bearing right there that goes with the selector switch, and usually I put some grease on there to keep it in place so it hooks onto the spring. But you don't want to lose that ball bearing because that is used for the detent on the selector switch. Okay, next you have to remove the screw that's in the back here that holds the engine in place. There are two ways to do that. You can either use a 2.5 millimeter Allen key and put it into the hole that's right back here and sort of twist it over and over again. This is kind of a pain to do. I guess you could probably do it this way as well. Or you could actually just loosen up the collar and loosen the buffer tube and move this plate out of the way. Now, I have a tool that actually makes it easy to loosen up this buffer tube. So you can put this on here. You slide this down, locks right in, and then you just turn it, and that loosens it up. Once this collar's loose, you can actually just slide this out of the way and expose the screw that's down in there. And it's very easy to then unscrew that screw. And you can actually take it out if you need to. Set that aside. Now once that screw is out, the engine actually will lift right out of the lower receiver. Just very carefully pull this up. Get the trigger out of the way. And it comes right out. Let's get the selector plate out. Alright, there. Actually takes the whole FCU with it. It has a very large buffer tube on the 417. Now that you've got the engine extracted from the gun, to actually remove the engine from the lower housing, it just takes two screws, so it's very easy to remove and get access to the nozzle if you need to change the nozzle. I have one locking screw on the back right here. You take that out, and then you have the one locking screw at the front right up here, and you take this out, and once these two screws are taken out, the whole engine just lifts right out of the lower housing. You can then unscrew the banjo valve here, take this off and replace the nozzle if you needed to, or lubricate the nozzle. I'm using a little 3D printed bracket back here that holds the mini circuit board. Keeps everything nice and tidy so the wires don't get all over the place. When you reassemble it, you just have to be careful to tuck the air hoses back down into the gearbox shell. Once those are tucked down in, it just sits right back in there. I usually start by putting in the back screw first, since that sort of centers things. Put the back screw back in. Leave it a little bit loose until I tighten the front screw. Put the front screw back in the front. Just hand tight, doesn't have to be very tight. And then tighten this down again here. Okay, now to reassemble everything, I'm going to first just put this little piece of wire cover I have on here, heat shrink tubing, just to protect the wires from getting pinched on anything. Okay. Receiver. Okay, to put it in the low receiver, first feed the wire harness into the buffer tube. And you want to bring it in at an angle like this so you can clear the circuit board and bracket. When it gets to this point, you just have to push the trigger in so it clears the little magwell wall there. Let's make sure we get the selector plate back on there before we forget. Alright, you hold the selector plate and it sort of partially slides in. Now at this point, you have to get the trigger to fit into this trigger hole here. So it helps just use a small screwdriver. You push the trigger in and it'll clear into that hole, and once that's clear, it drops right in. There you go. Now we just replace the rear screw that locks it in place. Let's tighten that back up. Again, hand tight, don't over torque anything. And we'll tighten this down here at the very end. I'm just going to do that partially. Okay, then we can put the grip back on. Slide the grip in place. I think there's a screw already inside here. Okay, there we go. And let's put the plate back on here. Up is the selector plate. The selector switch. To make the selector switch go on there, you'll want to try to get this little slot lined up with the semi-auto so it's straight down. Gives it really good alignment that way. Then you can carefully, again, don't forget this little ball bearing that sits on that spring, seat this on here and hold it down in place. You have to kind of push it, make sure it doesn't pop up. Then you can put the screw and lock that in place. Again, you don't have to over tighten this, especially if you don't want to strip this one screw. And there it goes. It should be good to go. And then you put your macro line connector back on, and you can do final reassembly of the gun. But that's it. That's how you remove and reinstall the fusion engine on an HK417.